All right, I did not coordinate that walk-up music, but that was awesome. Thank you very much. By the way, these AV guys just lint rolled me in the back before, so note whenever you go to a conference, like, these are your guys. So thank you for having me today, David. I appreciate it. And I just want to say up front that I definitely will leave room for questions, so please have questions. I want to make sure that you walk away with something meaningful and meaty to take back and do something differently with your team. So with that, a little bit about Topo. We're a research and advisory firm. We focus exclusively on sales, sales development, and marketing. I'm proud to say that we were the first analyst firm to have a dedicated sales development practice, which I was a part of building, and I'm really happy about that. A little bit about me, my background. I spent about the earliest 10 years of my sales career actually as a consultant. So I went around the valley building inside sales teams and sales development teams for hire for startups, about 40 of them all over. So we would go in and we would actually either create a team from scratch if they didn't have one, or if they had one, we would overhaul that team. And that included putting the processes in place, hiring the people, training them, getting them ramped, then hiring a manager, and we would ride off into the sunset, and the organization was left with a fully functioning team. So I'm really proud of the fact that I was able to do that over and over and over again. I call it job hopping securely. But it gave me a really great vantage point to be able to see what are the things that teams typically do well, what are the things that they typically do wrong, and as teams continue to mature and evolve, what are the different steps that they must go through to sort of reach that next level of optimization. And I was drawn to Topo for several reasons, but one primary reason is that we have a mantra of specificity. So yes, as David mentioned, we do a lot of thought leadership, we do a lot of research, we're out there in the blogosphere like a lot of you, understanding what is that sort of perfect ideal utopia for sales development, but we have a mantra that specificity wins. And so we pride ourselves on helping teams figure out how you take all of that thought leadership and actually go do something differently with your team. How do you translate that into action? What is the next thing that I should do as a sales development leader to move that needle for my team? And so some of the things we do with our teams, we do build playbooks, of course. Hopefully, does everyone in here have a playbook for their team? If you don't, you should, and come talk to me after. We do a lot of advisory, so helping teams understand that, like, should I specialize? Like Henry mentioned, when should I specialize? Should I do account-based? Answering those questions, the answer is not always yes for account-based, by the way. How should I handle these various challenges? And then we do a lot of workshops and trainings around that, and that gives us this great vantage point, again, to see what are the best teams doing. Now, a lot of our research focuses on high-growth organizations. So a lot of them SaaS, a lot of sales development teams that are growing rapidly and making mistakes rapidly. And so that, again, gives us this perspective. And we've been fortunate enough to work with some very big organizations, but time and time again, one of my top 3 advisory questions is usually around execution. How do I help my SDRs execute better? By the way, the number 1 question is always comp. So I know everyone's thinking about that because we're headed into the new year here pretty soon. But in working with all these organizations, the question, there are various stages of their company cycle. Some of them have SDR teams that are just getting started, even the largest ones. We still see teams that are just getting started with sales development. And the question comes down to, I've got my team set up, they're doing stuff, but how do I optimize what they actually say? How do I make sure they're doing the right number of touches? This whole execution of we've set SLAs, we've set the process, but how do I make sure that's happening on the front lines is still a big challenge for a lot of teams. And so with that in mind, one of the things I want to talk to you about is that challenge of personalization. So my goal for today, I'm gonna speed through this because I absolutely want questions from everyone, but my goal is to share some of those perspectives around this challenge of personalization, offer some best practices, and hopefully leave you with something to take back and do something differently with your team. Does that sound good? Good use of time? All right. So a little brief history on the evolution of personalization. Henry alluded to this too. 3 to 5 years ago, we were all doing the batch and blast. We were all doing spray and pray with generic templates, send one template to a ton, and let's get that low-hanging fruit. That certainly worked. We know that we've moved away from that. Not just with account-based, although the account-based movement has helped it, and the pendulum swung us to this other end of the spectrum, which is highly customized, right? Very research heavy. Let's get in there, let's understand everything we can about the account, about the person we're talking to, and let's talk to them, as if no two prospects should ever receive the same email. I have one of my clients that I work with, I was like, this is a killer philosophy, I love this. We can focus more on the accounts that matter most, we can deliver meaningful insights, we can make sure that every interaction is an interaction that would cause that person to want to talk to us. That's awesome, right? And I want to share this. I've been sharing this for a while, so if any of you have seen me speak, this is my favorite SDR email. It's spectacular. I'll give you the story behind it. There's an SDR. She's now an SDR leader. She spent time targeting Starbucks as one of her accounts, and she said, you know what? I'm just going to go straight to the top. And I went, this is pretty cool. So she got together with her customer success team. She even got together with some of the support team. She said, if they were a customer, what are some of the really cool things we could do with them? And so she said, let's do this. Let's treat them like they're a customer and let's lay out all these ideas. And how fun is that to do for Starbucks? We all have ideas about what we want. And so she laid out this beautiful email. And she got a response from Howard Schultz. And she got the meeting. I don't know if they ultimately became a customer. But the point is it worked, right? This 100% custom is awesome. Now I realize I am absolutely part of the problem. Because this is really freaking hard. This SDR, this is probably the penultimate customization of her career. Could she repeat it? Probably not. Could she do it to a lot of accounts? Probably not. And she was, in my experience, one of the top SDRs I've ever met in terms of her creativity, her execution, her work ethic, all of those things. So if our best of the best struggle to do this all the time, how can we expect that to be the method that's going to make our teams successful? So it's awesome. I admit, I'm sorry, part of the problem. I've been showcasing this everywhere. It's still a really killer email. But how do we repeat this across hundreds of accounts? And how do we make sure that our SDRs are still sort of justifying the value, right? Which is talking to a bunch of prospects. And so I was trying to understand, like, what is it that caused this to be so hard? I mean, yes, sometimes it's you just don't find those good trigger events. Like, you know, we're looking at, like, did we tell them how to do this? And we did. Oh, I'm stuck here. There we go. And so when we look at, like, what we told them to do to make that possible, we asked them to research, go look at the account, go look at the buyer, and create a compelling message, right? So that's what we do. We still want to do that. Problem is, we weren't super specific. So back to our methodology again, our mantra, specificity wins. How many SDRs are in the room, by the way? Quick show of hands. Okay, so our research shows that 90+% of SDRs have 2 years or less work experience, right? So I don't know about any of the SDR leaders in the room, but 2 years out of college myself, if somebody said, go do research and write a compelling message, I'm like, I don't know what a compelling message is. And sure, we give them examples like my email before, right? This is what amazing looks like. So I go and try to roll my own version of that and copy that, right? I don't really understand what it takes to make that good. And so what we should have done instead is when we said go research your prospects, we shouldn't have told them things like go to LinkedIn, go to their website and read their 10K. That's what we told them. Maybe I'm the only one, but a couple years out of school, I read the whole 10K. I was like, I'm not really sure what I'm looking for, but I'm sure I'll find it eventually. And after doing all this research, 30 minutes to an hour, it'll kind of make sense and I'll be able to craft my email. Instead, the reality was they spent all that time, they still didn't know what to do, so they wrote their own templates, right? And so instead, we should have told them exactly what to look for. If you're going to LinkedIn, here's exactly what you're trying to find there. If you're going to their website, be able to answer this question. In 1 to 2 sentences, what does that organization do? And how do I match them to peer customers that we work with? How am I supposed to use that research, right, in my message? And so if we could tell them that, that helps them figure out then, now what is the formula for customizing that message? So that I can repeat it over and over again when I'm reaching out to all of the accounts that I have to get to and all of the different prospects, right? And so now we see the pendulum swinging back to the middle. So we had the super generic, not customized at all. Then we had 100% custom, which is still really awesome. And we're still gonna do it for our highest tier of accounts, but not when it counts to having like enough activity to justify our existence. So now we're swinging back to the middle, and it comes back to how do we create a formula to help SDRs and ourselves as leaders coach them around how to do this consistently and repeatedly. So something I'd like to offer today is a framework for that formula. And so I'm watching my clock up here. I want to leave time for questions. So I'm going to offer up this framework, and I'm going to give you a few examples, and then I want you to drill me on it. Like, I want you to walk out crystal clear on something I go do differently, or even for some of you who are SDRs working right here, try it out. Come talk to me while we're here today. And that formula is about the research. We want to prepare to send our message in the most effective, concise way possible. So how can I find exactly what I need to customize my message and not more, and just get to the message already? And then once I've got that, the second phase is, how do I create a message that sets up why I'm reaching out? So depending on your sales methodology, we don't subscribe to any one at Topo. You could do the why you now, you could do medic, you could do challenger, whatever it is. It's like I have to set context for why the heck I'm bothering that person's inbox today, or blown up their phone, or whatever it is. So I'm going to set up the message, then I have to find a way to engage them, right? I have to make sure that what I have to say is going to pull them into a conversation. This sounds, I'll get specific, trust me, because I realize that's a kind of a dangerous word right now. And then we got to have a compelling offer to pull them into that next step of the conversation, right? So we prepare the message, we set it up, engage, and offer. Now we know that if we just leave it here, we're going to do a whole lot of setting up how awesome we are as an organization, right? So we have to make sure that this formula is enabled with the right kinds of things to say, right? So the prepare stage has to be, do I know enough to set context for that setup and to pull in the engage? And to me, you heard me mention earlier, it's like when I'm doing that research, do I know enough about that organization to connect them to the stories of the people that I work with? So my research is to be able to connect it to that use case story. Now that's a whole nother thing that we can talk about another time, but as an SDR in the room here today, pick one customer. You probably have a 2-page data sheet on it. That's fine, 1 or 2 pages. Find a way to tell that story as your value prop. Not what you do, not we provide X, Y, and Z, and here's all the features. But we actually, I'll give you an example. One of my favorite customers that we've worked with, this example was just so cool. It was, I believe, CIOs for retailers. And this particular use case, the SDRs could immediately tell this story. They're like, oh yeah, we do this and the other. I said, okay, great. If you were talking to the exact person in that role somewhere else, I believe this was head of store operations, and they were talking about opening new stores for Tory Burch. I really liked that one. I thought that was cool. And so they went and they told the story of like, hey, you know, you're running store operations for X. This is our prospect. We actually work with the store operations team over at Tory Burch, and they were struggling because it took them 3 months to open a new store. All of the things that they had to collaborate on, all of the back and forth, it took them 3 months, and we were able to actually give them a platform that helped them do that in 3 weeks. I'd love to talk to you more about how we did that. I didn't tell them anything about what we did. And I'm not saying you don't have to tell them anything about what you do, but the point is I'm engaging them on something that matters to them, right? It's all about putting it in the language of that person. And so we want to make sure that our engage is a concise, tight story, and then we pull them into an offer that's going to be really interesting. So I'm pulling them into that offer to learn more about that specific use case, who's a direct competitor of theirs. And so by following this formula, my SDRs are able to do that prepare, set up, engage, and offer over and over and over and over again. And so let's take a look at some examples. So one thing I want to start off by saying is there is no silver bullet SDR message. So it's about using the formula. Could these be shorter? Yes. Could they have said it differently? Yes. But these are examples that we have literally, within 3 days of training, we ask SDRs to send us notes that they got responses from. These are some of those notes. And you'll see how the formula shows up again and again. So it's not about being perfect. It's about following the recipe. And so in this example, this particular one is a use case story, like I was just mentioning. This particular person was reaching out. I want to highlight the first thing. They set it up. They set it up by giving context. We work with organizations just like you. Now that's not new, right? We've seen that in our emails before, so you don't got to completely change everything you're doing. But then next I got to pull them into the engage, which is my story. We help them do something very specific that you care about. You, that persona. Not just you as a general organization, but you in that particular role. I'm working with other people just like you. I get your life. This is the problem we solve for them, and here's my offer. I'd like to share more insights. This got a response. Totally did. I set up, I engage, I offer. Another example. I set it up. I heard you weren't able to make this thing. So sometimes we get inbound, sometimes we get, let's call them lukewarm. In this case, this person wasn't able to attend an event. So therefore, we give context for why I'm reaching out again, setting it up. I'm engaging. You would have heard this. I find this very compelling for you. And then I'm pulling into an offer. Now, this is kind of a longer one, sure, but that doesn't matter. The point is we followed the formula and we added something of value. Now, I'm not saying make all your messages long, but the point is that you don't have to be perfect, right? You just have to make sure that you're enabled to tell these different components. And so one thing I would advise to you for SDR leaders in the room is make sure your team is enabled to do this. Make sure that they have the ability to distill down your 1 to 2 page data sheets into these quick stories. Make sure that you walk them through and audit their messages to say, okay, where did we set it up? What's our engage? Could we get tighter? I do this. I'm not sure if they made it today, but one of my clients, we just did an email audit workshop with their SDRs where we took them through this, and then 3 weeks later we said, okay, use it now to show me your best emails. And we actually said, like, why would they care about that? Where's your engage? Is that for you? Is that for them? Like, challenge your team to make sure that it's not about us and it's actually about that prospect, and challenge them to that next level of specificity. And then the other thing to look at is again, there's no one silver bullet email. So think about how we use all these messages together. So you may start initially with something that is very much a story about how we helped a company in the same vertical. And then from there, we may go to like how we help that specific person in that specific role. And then maybe we go with another thing that's actually around some sort of industry topic. So we're not relying on that one trigger event. We're not relying on that one thing that gives us that amazing magical email. But rather, we're using these things together in this campaign, and the recipe unfolds to make it worthwhile for us. Okay? So I'm going to leave you with this again, and then I want questions. So somebody's got to ask one. So again, we know generic doesn't work. We know that. I think everyone in the room gets that. It still applies for some teams, but for any of you that are doing outbound, for any of you that are really going after any deal size that's over 10K, it's not a good decision. We know 100% customized is amazing. Like that's still a killer example, and we should still do it for our highest value accounts, but we should do it selectively. That should not be the only thing that your SDRs are doing, or they just won't be able to justify their seat at the table. They won't be able to develop enough pipeline to matter. And so this middle ground is this formula. Now this is our formula. We've used it. It works. We use it with hundreds of clients. It works. But come up with your own formula. Right? If there's tweaks on it, like don't feel constrained by this, but it's like the point is like they need to repeat it consistently over and over again. And you need to teach them the specifics of how to do it. So it's not go research and write a compelling message, but it's research to accomplish, to find this, to be able to find out which customers they matched to, and to be able to craft the message like this. Okay? Now, one thing I do want to mention is we actually, having a practice dedicated to sales development, we also have a conference in March that shares a lot of these frameworks and best practices, as well as some of the awesome stuff like Henry mentioned, which is teardowns of other people just like you who are doing this and what they have done to overcome some of these challenges. So if you're interested, come talk to me, and with that, we'll take questions. Yes?
This is going to be purposely vague.
Please.
What about subject lines?
Yeah, subject lines, same thing. So I find that things like, I forget the exact specifics, but like you don't want to be vague. Be very specific. I'm reaching out to you for X. We find that the short of 5 words or less, questions convert well, but specificity, using the person's name, using your organization's name, using a customer's name. That's what we find.
What about outsourcing data gathering for account lists, contact lists, versus having the SDRs do it themselves?
Yeah, you know, I've got that question 3 times today. I'm glad you asked that. So if you can, do. Like, you can't outsource all of it, but if there are programmatic things that you can find for them to save them time, please do. Like, have somebody else, an intern, or we even see them called sales development associates, go and find the 1 to 2 sentences of what they do and the matching customer peers. That shortens you. Like, somebody else can pull in that use case, and you can just use it to customize your message. Yeah, so if there are things that they can, absolutely. Take it off their plate. Others? SDRs in the room, do you guys feel like you know how to go customize this? Like, follow the formula and you'll be able to to create your own. Anyone else? All right, I'll be hanging out. Oh, yep.
So Henry ended with, you gotta end with picking up the phone. We didn't talk about the phone.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's a Topo guide out there with the data on this, but do you have anything to say about the combination of the sequence with customization and email?
Yeah, so you'll notice that, yes, these were a lot of emails. To me, your message, whether it's phone, whether it's social, whatever touches you're making, need to follow this principle. So the email is the cornerstone for every SDR. There's no denying that. We still advocate heavily and see a lot of teams having success with the phone, so we don't advocate dumping it. Most of the touches that you saw in that previous slide are email phone touches joined together. So the email sets the stage, and you tell a shortened version in your voicemail, for example. Or if you get someone live, you've now got your script as to why that person should give you some time. It's a good question. Yeah?
What do you think of unsolicited text prospects?
We can talk about that more after. I think it depends on your prospects. How many people text their prospects? At work? Yeah? Yeah? Anybody get any like really mad texts back? No? Do it. I think it's still nascent. We see a few teams use it. I've had teams use it in the past. They still use it very selectively. Like I don't text every single prospect. I may just text someone that I'm further down, or we had scheduled a meeting, but they bailed. I use the text as the way to get them back. Yeah. So it's used selectively. Yep.
From start to finish, what would you say is an efficient amount of time for like these personalized emails?
Yeah, 5 minutes or less. Once you get really good at it and you know exactly what you're looking for, it's 5 minutes. I know exactly. I go, execute, check, 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 check. I got it. So 5 minutes to find the research. Depending on how good you are at customizing the message, it can take 5 to 10 minutes after that. Yeah.
How much follow-up would you do after an email like this? Like how many touches? What's the right number?
So it depends on inbound versus outbound. We advocate 8 to 12 touches for inbound. Depends on the warmth as well. More for outbound, more if you're doing account-based, but they can't be the checking up on that one special email. They have to be some other flavor of value. So you noticed in the touch pattern, and let me see if I can go back actually. In the touch pattern, we have different sort of types. We might have one that focuses on a story around the account or like customers, others that focus on a specific challenge for that particular persona. I may use, my next follow-up is a different challenge. I tell the story for same persona, but a different challenge that they address. And it's funny because I get a lot of SDRs that then ask me, like, what if I pick the wrong challenge? And I'm like, well, you went from saying nobody was answering your emails, nobody was reading them, to now assuming they're reading all of them, so I wouldn't worry about that at all. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on strategy behind
Calendar
calendar invites?
invites, cold calendar invites?
Could be.
Could be. Well, it's like a text. So, I mean, I've gotten cold calendar invites, and I'm like, I know what you're doing. So it depends who you're reaching out to, and it depends how much you've tried to reach them. What we believe with touch patterns is that creates a profile of you as a person. So your email is one way to visually see your email come through, like your name. Voicemail is a way to hear your name. LinkedIn is a way to see your picture. And so if you're doing all of that and the person might start recognizing who you are and you send a cold invite, I've seen it work, just not as much. Are you having success with it, Andrew?
No. Don't
Okay. Okay. There you go.
What do you see activity metrics looking like between emails and dials in a day with this middle strategy between perfect amount of customization versus?
Yeah. So we still see the majority of teams doing more emails than calls. It's not quite 2x. But typically it depends if you include those like calls that don't leave a trace of who you are, like the call blitzes, war dials, some people call them. We advocate for touches combined together, so double touches or triple touches. And so the idea is that it's an email and a phone call. So whether you leave a voicemail or not, they're done together. And it's about circling the wagon. So a lot of teams still more heavy on email than on calls. Some of that is because of phone fear. And some of that is they believe that, well, my email will warm up such that I finally get the call. But we advocate keeping them pretty close. Yep.
So we're talking, this is not automated lead campaign. We're talking about manual touch, right?
Some of it can be automated. So to the question earlier on how much time to spend on research, some teams do all of their research up front. And so I will actually create all of these emails up front with my formula and then set them to send whenever, so that I as an SDR don't have to manually send them. But so I'm queuing them up. Or I made batch personas together. So everyone who's in that same role, I'm going to use the same use case for, and maybe in that same vertical. And so I would batch them together and potentially automate them in that way. But it's not hundreds, thousands of people at one time. Does that answer your question?
So I just don't understand how can you send to 40 different companies the same challenge? It's not customized.
But it's the same role. So we're doing the challenge based on that person's role.
Oh, it's like this.
So exactly. These are challenges that other VPs of operations have. Yeah, yeah. Yep. Okay.
Gotcha. Previous question about 5 minutes of research.
Mm-hmm.
Just so, like, I understand, you mentioned going down the line, hitting those checkpoints. What level of personalization do you find is too much and doesn't impact, the prospect? And where do you think are those really targets that you really need to hit to get to that next piece?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to depend highly on your prospects. So what I'm talking about here becomes your default. If you have a great trigger event, do it. I mean, if you've got some great personal connection or referral connection, absolutely leverage that. But I think most of us found everybody was leading with that, and then you're like, I don't know what to do when I don't find that. This is what you do when you don't find that. This becomes your default personalization to still be relevant enough to what that person cares about in their role. But if you've got more than that, I mean, don't get creepy. Like, I've seen some really creepy stuff out there. But like, I mean, keep it to their business life. But I think there's a lot of stuff that you can still do. And if you can find it, it only helps. Yeah. Okay.
That's awesome. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.